Hello, and welcome to the Apps in the Sky YouTube channel. Today, we will be looking at some Kotlin programming, more specifically, how to connect and to communicate with a Bluetooth device. In my case, it will be an Arduino hooked up to an LED. So, without further ado, let's get into the coding. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is to start Android Studio. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is start a new project. This is going to be Bluetooth tutorial. Right, so we've got the company domain set, got it saved into a project location. What we want to do next is we want to make sure we include Kotlin support. Otherwise, we won't be able to support Kotlin, which is what we want. Click next. Decide what we want to get it to run on. So we're going to have it run on phone and tablet on API 21, which is Lollipop. Next. Just going to want an empty activity to start with. Call that activity the select device. Select device activity. We want to generate the layout. We want to just call that select device layout. I want it to be backwards compatible as well. Just click finish, and then we'll let Android Studio build it. Okay. So now we go into our project. We can still open up the project section. Make sure we got it select the drop-down select to Android. Expand app, expand res, and expand Java, just so we can see everything else. And no, I don't think we need the Gradle. Right, so we have our activity for the page as well as the layout. So let layout generate. So while that's done, let's do a bit of setup. So to get Bluetooth, to enable Bluetooth, what we need to first do is get the manifest. So inside the manifest, we want to make sure that we have set the user permissions, so that way that our app is actually allowed to use the Bluetooth protocol. So to do that, it's very simple. Just create a user's permission tag, and the name of that is Android permission. Android dot permission dot all caps Bluetooth, and then just close it. To save us time, I'm going to copy that, paste it down, and it's called Android Bluetooth _admin. So we need those two permissions for Bluetooth to work, and then that's our manifest done. We don't need to touch that until we have to deal with other pages. The only other thing I would suggest to do is on this activity tag, which is the select activity, our main one. What we want to do is set the orientation to portrait. This way we don't have to deal with the screen rotating at all, so it just makes it a bit easier when designing the layout. Speaking of which, let's deal with that now. So for this project, all the layouts are going to be constraints layouts. Now, the main reason for that is that I find it just makes layouts a lot easier to create. So it's very simple to get everything in the right position, and it's just a lot faster, and that's just the way I prefer to do it. I just find it's just a lot quicker and a lot more efficient. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the text view of the layout, so we can actually see all of the XML that builds this layout. We're going to remove this text view, and what we're going to do is add a list view. So we add a list view tag with the width being wrap content and the height being 0 dp. The reason why we're doing 0 dp is because the height will be dictated by the constraints that we set it. So what we're going to do is close it there. And now we're first going to constrain it to the top. So do constrain, it's going down the suggestions, top to the top of parent. And we're going to set, and then the last thing we're going to do for now on this list view for the second is set the ID. So equal ID equals @ plus / ID, and we're going to call it select device list. So what this list is that it's going to contain every single paired Bluetooth device to our phone. So that way you will be able to select which device you would like to communicate with. The reason why we set the ID is twofold, so that we can, if we ever come back to alter this page, we can constrain stuff to that list, to this list view, and it also means that we can actually reference it when we're actually coding it. So when we have to add logic to populate the list, we only need to refer to it by this ID. So now we've got the list view written, we now need to add a button. Now this button will do is that it will be used to refresh the list. So if we set the width to 0 dp, so again it'll be, the width will be dictated by the constraints, and then set the height to wrap content. This way we can read whatever text is in there that we set. So as you can see in the preview, it's in the top left because we haven't constrained it yet. So we're going to constrain the left and the right to the parent. Constrain left to the left of parent. And right to the right of parent. You see that then stretches it across the entire page. We're then going to set the margins for the left and right so it's not physically touching the edges of the page. So margin start be 20 dp. And then copy that, paste it down, and just set, instead of margin start, margin end. And the reason why we use start and end instead of left and right is because for any languages that don't use left and right, it makes it so that it's compatible, basically. Okay, so then the last thing we then need to do for this button is set the ID. So Android ID equals ID / I'm going to call it select device refresh. Now, as a quick tip is that whenever you're setting IDs, naming convention tip is that what you do is that you would start the ID. The start of the ID is the name of the page, and then afterwards is then what the actual item is. The reason for that is that is so that you don't have duplicates on different pages, and so that you actually know which UI element comes from what page when you're actually coding it. Just makes it a lot more simple. Okay. The only other constraint we need to add on to this is setting the bottom, so we actually anchor it to the bottom of the page. So it's a very simple bottom. So constrain bottom to the bottom of parent. That just moves us to the bottom. And because we've done that, we just need to then set the margin. So margin bottom is again 20 dp. Okay. And then the absolute final thing that I want to do is constrain the list view's bottom to the top of the button so that we don't have the button being overlaid on top of the list view like it currently is. So it's very simple. Margin bottom, constraint bottom to the top of ID refresh. And there we go. And we're just going to set a bit of margin just to give it a bit of space. Margin bottom is 10 dp. There we go. Right, so that's now done. The only other thing I would want to do is to actually give this button some text. So one way you could do it is by doing inside the XML, giving it a text attribute and just typing in the text you want. Now, as you can see, this has actually thrown up a compiler warning, and that's because Android Studio really doesn't like you using hard-coded strings. So, the main disadvantage for this is that it causes a duplication of code. So you would have that word refresh just everywhere. So if you ever needed to change that, you'd make sure you've changed it everywhere. So what this basically aims to do is that if I Control exit, instead if I go into the values inside res values, the strings file inside here, if I define it, equals refresh, and then paste it in there, save it, and go back to the XML. I can then reference that string value by just typing in part of the word and then selecting the one I want. So that way I can then use that specific string wherever I want in the app, and if I ever need it changed, I can literally just go to the one place and change it there, and it will reflect throughout the entire app. So with that done, that's now the select device layout page done. So with that now done, I will move on to the actual meat of the tutorial, which is the Kotlin. So what we need this page to do is we need it to make sure that the Bluetooth is enabled. So if it isn't enabled, we need to enable it. If it is enabled, then we need to make it so that when it is enabled, we then make it so that when you press the refresh button, the list view will refresh with all the different paired devices that you have access to. And then what we then want to do is select the paired item. We then want to send specific data to the next page that we would need to use to do the rest of the communication. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to set up the state of the page. So what the state is basically the different variables and functions that this page needs to function properly. So I'm going to start with the variables. So we're going to set up our member variables first. So we're going to have four variables. So we're going to have a late init var. So a late init is basically a variable that you declare but you haven't actually initialized. So, and a var is basically a variable that can be changed. So in Java terms, think of it as just a standard variable, whereas if you do the keyword val instead of var, that makes it a read-only. But I'll cover that in a second. So we then want to set the name of the variable. So it's going to be m_Bluetooth adapter, because this is going to be our Bluetooth adapter. We then want to set the type as a Bluetooth adapter. So in Kotlin, the way you set a type is using a colon, whereas in Java, you would do something along the lines of private Bluetooth adapter, m_Bluetooth adapter. So that's how you do it in Java, and that's how you do it in Kotlin. So the next one we want to set is another late init. m_paired devices is a set of Bluetooth device. We then want a val, which is a read-only variable, called request enable Bluetooth to equal 1. So an advantage with using Kotlin is that it's quite smart when you're declaring variables. So it will basically, when you assign a variable, it will know what it is already. It will know what type it is already. So it just makes it a little bit cleaner when you're writing variables. The last one we want to do is something that's actually special to Kotlin. That's a companion object. So inside your companion object, you would define variables that you'd want to access from other classes, which is what we want to do with this one, which is a val extra address. Type string equals device address. So the reason why we've declared this variable in a companion object is because we're going to use this as the key for our extras, for our intent extras. So when we are moving data from this page to another page, we will be using this as the key to access it. And so because of that, we need to make sure that other pages are able to access it. Okay, so that's our member variable setup. We then want to set up our functions. So we've already got an onCreate function, and that's run whenever the page is started. We also want to have a private fun paired device list, as well as a override function on activity result. So the reason why we'd have this on activity result is because if the Bluetooth has been disabled, when we go to enable it, when we come back, we need to basically run a piece of some logic to actually tell the user that if the enabling of the Bluetooth was successful or not. So I think first place best to start with would be the onCreate function. So what we want to do is we want to assign our Bluetooth adapter. So we do m_Bluetooth adapter would equal a Bluetooth adapter dot get default adapter. So unlike Java, where you'd have to declare it as a new, you instead just have to say Bluetooth adapter dot get default adapter. We then want to make sure that it's not null. Is equal to null. So basically, what this null check does is check to see if this device is actually able to support Bluetooth. So if it is not able to support Bluetooth, then we want to just return and not do anything. So we do toast. So we want to basically tell the user that this device can't support Bluetooth. So we toast this device doesn't support Bluetooth. Okay. And then we want to return. Okay. So as you can see, this toast is red. The reason for that is because it basically doesn't exist in Kotlin to do it this way. So what we want to do is that inside our Gradle, in our build.gradle, what you want to do is add a compile for a library like that. So you go compile speech marks org.jetbrains.anco:anco-common:083. Now what this does is basically just adds a lot of extra functionality to Kotlin that it wouldn't natively have, so you can do various things. As a very good example, simple toasts. So because we've changed the Gradle, we need to make sure it's all synced and working properly. So you just click this button up here to sync it. Just wait for the project to sync. There we go. So now we go back. You can now see that it wants us to import it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go Alt Enter, and then that will add an import statement to allow us to use it. Okay. So the only other bit that I need to make sure we do is make sure that this Bluetooth adapter can actually be a nullable object. So we do that by putting a question mark at the end of there. So Kotlin, a really nice feature of Kotlin is that it does null exceptions a lot better than Java. So basically, you need to define each variable to whether it can be a not null or a nullable object. So originally, I had this Bluetooth adapter to be a non-nullable object, which means that this null check was pointless because basically it would assume that it could not be null. Now I've made it so it can be nullable. This now null check is needed. However, it's now thrown up an error message saying that a late init is not allowed on the properties of a nullable type. So it means basically I can't have that if it's nullable. So to fix that, you take that away and you then define it. So now you just set it to null. Okay. So now that's done. Then want to do some more function. We now want to do some more logic. So now we want to do an if not m_Bluetooth adapter dot is enabled. Okay, so now we've done that. You can now notice that we now have a red underline of the m_Bluetooth adapter. And what this is complaining about is that because it's a mutable object, it can change by the time it actually gets to this point. So what we want to do is we want to basically say that it's not going to be null by this point because we've already done the null check here. We know for a fact it's not going to be null. So to do that, you add two exclamation marks by the end of it, on the end of that, just before the dot is enabled, and that makes basically say that this is not going to be null. This will work fine. So what we do is check to see if the Bluetooth adapter is enabled. If it's not, then what we want to do is we want to create an intent. So val enable Bluetooth intent. So we want to create an intent that will open up the Bluetooth settings that will allow you to enable it or disable it. So that will equal intent Bluetooth adapter dot action request enable. Then we want to do a start activity for result of enable Bluetooth intent, and then we want to use the request that we have set up here. And what this will do is then start an activity that will then decide on whether that will let you set enable or disable Bluetooth. So now we've got a start activity for result. What we then need to do is then create an on-click listener that will allow us to refresh the list. So to do that in Kotlin, it's a lot simpler than in Java. So all you have to do is call the ID of the item you're adding an on-click listener to. So that would be the select device refresh. We do set on click listener. And now we're going to do it as a lambda. So instead of parentheses, you use curly braces, and then you want to call the function that you want to run on the on-click. So we want to do paired device list. And then that's the on-click listener. Compare that to Java, which is where you have to make sure it's clickable, and then you have to do an entire a good 5 odd lines of code in order to get that to work, to actually add the on-click listener. So it'd be like set on-click listener, and then it'd be new on-click listener object, and it's a lot more messy, whereas this is just a single line and it's done. So now we've got so with that written, that is now the onCreate function done. The next function we're going to do is the onActivity result. So if you notice, this onActivity result has actually got some underlines underneath the override fun. The reason for that is because it's technically at this point a redundant override because we're not actually overriding anything. To fix that, all you need to do is type some code to override. So what we're going to do is check to see if the request code is equal to the request enable BT. So request enable Bluetooth is, then we want to make sure the result code, we want to check to see what the result code is. So if the result code is equal to the activity dot result OK. We then want to so if the result is okay, we then want to check to see if the adapter has been enabled or disabled. To do that, it's just a case of do another if, and underscore Bluetooth adapter dot is enabled. As you can see, we've got that same problem again, so we know for a fact it won't be null by that point. Toast. So the text is going to be Bluetooth has been enabled. However, if it is not been enabled, then we want to do toast Bluetooth has been disabled. Okay, so the next thing we need to then do is an else on whether the result, if the result code is not result okay. So what we would do is do an else if result code is equal to activity dot result cancelled, then what would have happened is that Bluetooth enabling has been cancelled. So what you do is toast, just to let the user know, has been cancelled. And that is our on activity result then. So now the last function that we're going to be doing is the paired device list. So this is where the actual bit of Bluetooth the Bluetooth adapter we're going to be using it. So what we're going to do is we're going to be setting our paired devices. So m_paired devices is equal to m_Bluetooth adapter dot bonded devices. So this basically assigns all the bonded devices inside the Bluetooth adapter to the paired devices object. Then what we do is do val list. So we create a variable called list of type array list Bluetooth device. So it's going to be an array list of Bluetooth devices to equal an array list. And then check to see if not m_devices paired devices dot is empty. So we check to see if the paired devices set has got any data in it. So if it's not empty, we're then going to loop through it. And then for device, so the name of each iteration is type, which is a Bluetooth device. So you want to do list dot add device. So we're adding each device to the list, and then we're going to log each of the devices. So log.i, add the imports for it to work, and then that plus device. So that way the device is being logged as a string. Okay, we then want to do an else to the if. So if the paired device is empty, then we want to do a toast. No paired devices found. So this just tells the user that it has not been able to find any paired devices. Just make it a bit clearer. There we go. So after that if and else, we then want to create another variable called adapter. So val adapter will equal an array adapter. We're going to pass into it this Android r.layout.simple list item 1. So what each item in the list view is going to look like, and then the data that's going to be passed in. So we're going to pass in the context, the item stylings, and then the data. And then what we do is then we set the adapter of the list view. So like how we set the on-click listener for the button, we just call the ID. So it's select device list dot adapter will equal adapter. So that's then what that then does will populate the list view with the data of each of the paired devices. So the only other thing now we need to then do is then set an on-click listener for each of those buttons, for each, not each of those buttons, for each of the items in the list view, so that if you select a device, you want to make sure that you want to actually pair with it. So to do that, you would do select device list dot on item click listener will equal an adapter view dot on item click listener. And what we're actually going to do is the adapter view is going to be an underscore because it's not going to be used. View will be an underscore because we don't use that either. The only one we use is I, which represents the position. So basically that will indicate the index on which item you've selected. And then L will just be another underscore. So this on item click listener is a lambda function. So we have the stuff that is passed in, and then we will do something depending on which one we clicked. So what we'll do is set and create two variables called device and address. About device, which is a Bluetooth device, to equal list position. So we know which device we've selected, and then we're going to set that. Then we're going to get the address from that device. So that's the MAC address, which is of type string, to equal device dot address. And the last thing we're going to do is then we're going to put that address inside an intent, and then we're going to start a new activity. So we're going to do val intent will equal an intent object. So we're going to pass in this. So this page is context, and then the next page that we want to go to. So that page will be called the control activity dot colon class dot java. We then want to put the address inside the intent. So to do that is go intent dot put extra, and the name is going to be extra address, and the value is going to be address. And the final thing to do is called start activity, passing in intent. So you can see that this control activity is red, and that's because it doesn't exist yet. So to actually make so it exists, what you do is go to where your select device activity is inside of your project. Right-click the folder it's in, and go New. And we want to create a new Kotlin file/class. I'm going to call it Control Activity. And the kind is that it will be a file, and we click OK. So this then creates a new blank Kotlin file. So we just want to get rid of this bit of placeholder text. And we're just going to quickly define it. So all it is called class control activity, and it's going to extend app compat activity. And the only thing it needs to do is add the override function on create. Override fun on create. Okay, just going to get rid of this. And get rid of this import. And there we go. That's then our next activity, which we will look at in part 2. So I'm just going to make sure all the code is cleaned up and ready to go. So if you can actually see on the side here, I've got a few warnings. Not warnings, it's more suggestions. So basically what it's saying is that these three variables here, they are actually been highlighted, and it's saying that these can be made private. Now, the reason why it's saying this is that because if they're not private, then other classes can actually affect and interact with them. So, for instance, the control activity we just created, that can change that state. So, in order to make the state consistent, we need to make sure they're set to private. So, what we do is we just put the private keyword at the front, and we just do that for all of them. And that will then deal with that problem. And then that's basically it. So that's part 1. So what we've covered is creating an Android project that is ready for Kotlin, adding Bluetooth permissions to the app, creating a simple UI that will be able to be so that we can view our paired devices, as well as being able to select a paired device once we have found it. In the next video, we'll be going through how we can actually connect and interact and communicate with that device. As well as I'm also going to show you a simple Arduino circuit that we can actually use to test this code.